Welcome to a new daily top AskReddit video. Today's topic.
What's the worst, I hate to break it to you, moment you had with someone? I had a guy working for me that was extremely nice, easy to get along with, and wildly inept. Not even low effort, but just not capable of learning seemingly basic tasks. We tried everything. Coaching, giving him legitimate checklist instructions, having a team lead sit with him for a couple weeks to walk him through basics, everything. Everyone said the same thing. He just couldn't do the job. Everything he did had to be double-checked by somebody else, which meant that we might as well have somebody else do it. But everyone liked the guy, they thought he was easygoing and cool to be around, everything. But still he just straight up couldn't do that job. So I had to find another place for him in the company that would better match his skills. The option would be for him to either take the lower job with lower pay, or he would be fired, with severance. I was not looking forward to the conversation. I called him in for a one-to-one to break it to him, and the first thing he started with was, "Hey boss, before we start I just want to tell you that I really feel like I've been doing a great job here and I would like to talk about a raise." Yeah, that conversation was not a fun one. Oof, the complete lack of self-awareness on his end makes it even worse somehow. He probably thought he was doing well because everyone liked him and was very nice to him. Dang skeptical smiley face. I had a similar instance in my career where the person legitimately was working harder than anyone else to try and learn and contribute. Everyone saw her as the first to show up, the first to volunteer, attending conferences on weekends to improve skills, and basically working on improvement constantly. As the one reviewing her work and attempting to give her additional training constantly, it became a huge burden on me trying to get her to some level of competency and failing to even get her to complete basic tasks without coaching constantly. I had to break it to her that we couldn't keep her on the team. She cried a lot about how she was working harder than everyone else and she didn't understand why this was happening. She got angry when I tried to give her some parting constructive criticism that she was asking for, and stormed off screaming that the group couldn't function without her and that we were going to realize all she really did after she was gone. It was so hard thinking of how much easier it would be with her gone. She really was a hard worker, really was dedicated, really gave it more effort than anyone else. She just wasn't capable of doing the job. Stories like these are proof that people who have learning disabilities or stuff like ADHD, telling them to just work harder or that they are just not trying hard enough, doesn't work. Sometimes, people simply lack the ability. It's like telling a person with bad eyesight to just try harder to see. No, it doesn't work. They need glasses or surgery. If you can't provide them with glasses or eye surgery, you can't just make them see, by telling them to trying harder. I had to tell my friend that the online girlfriend he'd been talking to for months was actually a scammer using stolen photos. He was planning to send her money to come visit, and breaking the news to him was one of the toughest conversations I've ever had. So my friend had a similar thing going on, claimed to have talked a bunch on the phone, and we didn't really believe him. Eventually, she asked for money for a ticket, and we were all like, there it is, and he finally believed us. He decided to put it to a test, to prove it once and for all, and told her that he'd bought her a ticket for the flight, assuming she'd make up an excuse to get out of it. He didn't really buy the ticket, assuming he was just calling out the catfisher. Well, to his surprise, the day of, he got a call from her, at the airport, panicking because they couldn't find the ticket. He managed to play it off as a mistake, and was able to get her on the flight. She really was the big titty goth girl from the photos. They dated for 5 years and she came out every summer for like 5 years before they grew apart. So he had to buy a ticket on the spot. That's rough. Oof. I had this one with an old friend that I lived with at the time. He'd been getting obviously catfished for years, thankfully not monetarily, just a lonely girl looking for attention, over the phone and internet, but just refused to believe the signs. It was weird for many reasons, one being that this dude was attractive, fit, and fun to be around, and shouldn't have had issues meeting women. Also we were young, like 20, 21. Plenty of time ahead of him. Once we broke him out of it he did just fine. It took me pushing him to buy plane tickets to meet her, though, because it had gotten to the point where the only way he'd believe she wasn't who she said she was is if he saw for himself. She thankfully came clean during the trip planning stage, so no loss on the tickets. He was in that relationship for years. Damn, I can't imagine dating for several years without actually having met that person IRL. Did he stop talking to her after she came clean? Did she ever say why she did it? Not me, but I went to visit my dad at his job and he has an employee there who was kind of bragging to his other co-workers about how well he has been doing at the job and thinking of asking for promotion. My dad later told me that he fired that guy later that day due to poor performance despite multiple attempts to help him. Lol. That happened with someone my husband worked with. Everyone stopped helping him because of his bragging. Once that happened, everything he touched was a complete disaster. The Midas touch. Every workplace has at least one. The worst is when these employees are incapable at their jobs and either good at sucking up to management or a nepo hire. Then they really do get promoted. My best friend in high school was overweight and would sweat profusely. We would come in after lunch in Texas and he would smell awful. I think he would wear his clothes without washing them after sweating. We had English after and the AC sucked, so teacher put a fan in the window. He would sit in front of the fan and blow his funk over everyone. The class got together and voted that I should be the one to tell him. Well, I had to break it to him that for the last year he has smelled horribly. I felt pretty bad, but he never stunk again. This is way more of a homie help out than a hate to break it to you. It's absolutely an awkward conversation, but I am sure he was happy someone said something. He was fairly defensive in the beginning. It took a little convincing, but after a few minutes, I got to him. Oof, definitely the time I had to tell a friend that the business opportunity he was so excited about was actually a pyramid scheme. He was so hyped, talking about how he was going to quit his job and be his own boss. I tried to ease into it, but there's really no soft way to say, hey man, you're about to lose a lot of money and ruin your friendships. I had a roommate who had lunch with an old college buddy one time who told him about this great business venture he could join, and gave him a lot of the details of it, including some paperwork. His friend told him several times, it's not an MLM. Quote, it was for Amway. You know, one of the earliest MLMs. His friend told him several times, it's not an MLM. Quote, if they feel the need to insist, it's not an MLM. It's totally an MLM. My sister-in-law. My niece plays field hockey and I love her. She plays in 2 different leagues. Meaning it's 3 hours of field hockey games every Saturday and Sunday. My sil expected me and my husband to drive an hour one way both days to watch niece play and pay rapt attention the whole time. Did I mention the games are at 7 a.m.? We did this about once a month on either Saturday or Sunday, and I guess this wasn't enough for her. We had to tell her that we loved niece, but we weren't going to be as involved as she was in the league. Sometimes people don't realize that other people have things to do. While it's great to hear that your niece is involved heavily in the league, and I wish all the best for her, but adults have lives too. We can't just put down what we are doing to commit to something like that. Once a month is good for sure, but not every weekend. If it was my own kid, I would try my ever-loving best to be there every game, but in this case, you are not obligated to do so. That's just my opinion. My parents told my brother no when he wanted to play hockey as a kid. It was expensive and very time-consuming, with tons of travel. It was pretty much going to disrupt the entire family. He played other sports and had other extracurriculars, so he wasn't missing out, but I think parents should be measuring the time commitment against the needs of the rest of the family. The amount of time people put into children's sports is insane. It's a little different once you're in high school and a bit more dedicated, but my friend has a 7-year-old with back-to-back Sunday soccer games. It's like 4 hours of soccer. She doesn't expect anyone to go, and is in fact completely overwhelmed by the amount of time children's extracurriculars require now. When I was a kid it was like Wednesdays for 8 weeks in the fall there was kids soccer. It was an hour and a half. Now kids are expected to do so much and be so serious. My dad is a hyper-masculine Latino who thought my dorky ass could get a football scholarship. I'd practice before and after, actual practice, and to stay in shape I had to play all other sports. Basketball, baseball, soccer, boxing, BJJ, and wrestling. Practices were often one after another. I substituted for a coach last weekend, and watching the parents shriek and scream at their kids who clearly didn't want to be there fucking triggered me, and I said some really mean shit to a mom, but I don't regret it. I'm sure it'll be awkward if we ever have a parent conference, but FFS, it's high school cross country, your daughter is 14 and she hates sports. Exclamation mark. I came back from my first day of finals in my first semester of college to find 2 women in suits and a campus police officer waiting for me. The women were mental health counselors from the university. One of them tried to talk to me but started crying, the other one couldn't say anything either. It was finally the cop who told me that someone had broken into my mother's house that morning and murdered her, my mom. That is awful, I'm so sorry. My sister and her husband had a newborn baby. 4 days old. My sister's husband turned to me and said, he'll sleep soon, right? Quote, I'm chuckling at this as I sit here sleep deprived after several months. My sister was recently celebrating that the youngest is now sleeping through the night, their daughter is too. She hadn't had a full night's sleep in over 2 years. Trying to ask as many, no, but how are you really going, questions to everyone I know with young kids, so I know what TF I'll be getting myself into. Parenting unlocks a cool new feature called Tired Plus. I had an upper management type guy try to explain to me, in a very condescending way, how a specific device works and how to install it. All completely wrong. I wrote the manual for it, I own the patent, it's named after me. Based on your username, I'm getting all sorts of crazy ideas as to what that device may be. Unfortunately it's my Christian name. I really should have named it the Longpork device lol. The company I was at called in a consultant, Peter, to help with a bit of data migration. We're in a meeting and the guy is laying out a pretty easy to follow timeline that sounds like it'll take about a week. Longer than we'd thought, but totally doable. The boss didn't like that and started pestering Peter with what ifs. What if we didn't use a staging machine and dumped it all at once? What if we physically migrated the data via tape instead of using the network, etc. After the third or fourth, that won't work because Peter asks the boss if he knows who wrote the software in the first place. Boss, PalSoft, why? Peter, and do you know why they were called PalSoft? Boss, no. Enlighten me, smart guy. Peter, because my initials are PAL and I started the company. The boss didn't have any more questions or suggestions. Came to find out later that we wrangled Peter because of a personal relationship he had with someone in the C-suite.